And welcome to another exciting episode of The Energy That Surrounds Us. We are live on a Friday night, which is unusual. And quick housekeeping, the reason for that is Tuesday night when we tried to go live, there was a glitch. And so we were finally able to fix the glitch. So we're bringing you the show live tonight. So with that, I am so privileged, blessed beyond words, and so grateful to be able to present to you all John J. Davis.
Hey, Michael, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I got to tell your audience, I was the glitch. I was the one that had the problems on my end on Tuesday, but I got it figured out and always trying to better my tech skills, and that was just another lesson I learned, but I'm glad to be with you. I'm excited to be on your show. So thank you so much for inviting me on.
Thank you. And I am so glad that we get to share your experience with our audience here. And so I know there's a question in the chat room already, but I'm going to save that till after you're sharing your experience because I want to make sure we have full time for that.
Okay, fantastic.
So, for the audience here that may not have caught you on our Paranormal Versus episode, can you give a little bit of background?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was 21 when I had my near-death experience. I had never had any kind of an experience like that before. I had never even heard of a near-death experience, so I had no idea what they even were. And I had an accident. To kind of give you the rundown of how this all happened, my dad was in sales, and one year he had won a sales contest, and he won 2 mopeds, or what we would call scooters now. And we would ride those scooters all over the neighborhood, especially on the weekends. Well, one of these weekends, I had an accident and I slammed into a tree. And the way that I landed, I landed in such a way that I tore the tendons off my right hand. And I had to go in for surgery to have them reattached. Well, I had never had surgery before. I had hardly ever spent any time in a hospital when I was 21. So the day of the surgery comes up, and when they give me the anesthesia, I had a major allergic reaction and it stopped my heart. And I was officially dead for 7 minutes. And it was during that 7-minute period that I had this experience that absolutely changed my life. And I didn't know at the time what a near-death experience was. Only after reading Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life, did I come to realize that, oh my gosh, I had a near-death experience. So all these years later, I have just been sharing my story with anybody who will listen. One of the things about my that the other side told me, and I'll mention this when we get to the end of the show, but they told me, they said, you must tell them there is no death. And all these years later, that's what I've been doing. And the weirdest thing, Michael, about this is I have 100% recall of everything I saw, experienced, everything I was told. And what's so weird about that is ordinarily I have a really bad memory. Like, I can't remember what I had for dinner last night. So I think it was God that gave me the ability to remember every single thing that happened so that I could spend the rest of my life sharing with people that there really is no death. What we're all afraid of is nothing to be afraid of. When we die, we just go back home again where we came from. So I love sharing my story. It's something that inspires me to this day, and not a day goes by that I don't think about what I learned. To me, it's just such an extraordinary experience, and something I forget is I have lived with this for 30 years now. I know, not just believe, but I know there is so much more that happens when we pass. And I sometimes I have to stop myself to think what people, when they hear my story for the first time, what it really sounds like to them. It is really extraordinary. And to this day, I still don't know why they gave me the experience that they did. Because I'm not like you. I don't have a podcast. I don't have a radio show, or I don't even have a website. So they must have known that. They must have known that I wasn't going to be an Oprah. And so why did they give me such an extraordinary experience? So I've always felt like I just have to do my best to try to reach as many people as I can and try to give people the hope that when their loved ones pass, they're not really gone. They're just in another place. And so I'm just thrilled to be able to share my story on your show tonight.
Point that that you have 100% recall,
Yeah.
because I'm a little jealous still because I've had three, and I probably have maybe 3% recall,
Oh, really?
and I'm like, I don't. Yeah, it's amazing to me that you have 100%. And when I tell people about this experience you're about to share, I always tell everyone it's a unique experience on the basis of because you have that 100% recall.
Yeah. And normally I'm like you. Normally my memory or my recall is about 3% on a good day. But I don't know. It has to be God that gave me the ability to remember all these years later. Because I'm 58 now. This happened when I was 21, and my memory is it's just like I experienced this whole thing like it was yesterday. It never goes away. It never gets fuzzy. I remember every single detail. And there have been times when I have shared my story with people, and there'll be things that I remember that I haven't told people that I just forgot to mention. Because my story, I have to write it down. I had to go and write this down so I wouldn't forget anything. So many things, they showed me so much, and I don't want to forget a single thing because I know that everything that they showed me, they wanted me to tell people. So I've written it down, and over the years, I've just kept that with me all the time so I don't forget anything.
And you ask why you, and I think it's on the basis and the grounds of because you don't have the 100% memory recall like you're saying on an average day. So you're going to be in a place where when you remember this, it's going to be like, wow.
Yeah.
And that's going to draw people in to where if someone had, say, I think they call it the eidetic memory, where it's they see something once and they have a forever memory of it and every
Yeah.
detail. And if that's their everyday life, they're not going to tell the story with the passion and the, you know, feelings behind it. It's going to be like, yeah, it's a normal everyday story to them. So that may be why they chose you.
Oh, I never thought about that. That's a really good point. I'll have to think about that.
But, and also with that being said, I feel like now is a good time to share the experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to always before we had social media, I used to just tell people individually, friends, people I met at work. I used to do a lot of volunteer work with hospice, and that was a perfect place to share with people, where they're going to go when it's their time to go, what's going to happen. So they weren't so afraid. And then one day I just thought, you know what? Now that we have Facebook, what if I just put my story on Facebook? So I did that, and it resonated with a lot of people. And I started getting people asking me to come share my story on their podcast, just like you did. And that's how people have found me. And it's been great because there is nothing that I like more than sharing my story and giving people hope.
And I think that's a great transition for the show to go right into sharing the experience with everyone.
Okay, sure. Yeah. And Michael, feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions.
I'll wait for a pause if I have a question.
Okay, sure, sure. Well, I'll jump right in. So when I was in the hospital and they were getting ready to give me the anesthesia so they could fix my hand, I was just laying there. I had no expectations. I had never had anesthesia before for anything. So I didn't know what was going to happen. I think if I had had some inkling that I was going to have an allergic reaction, I probably wouldn't have gone under all the way. But I didn't know at the time. So when they gave me the injection of the anesthesia, within just a couple of seconds, my heart stopped and I died. And this is where my story begins. I woke up, I opened up my eyes. It was like 1 second later, like a second later, I opened up my eyes and I was standing in the most beautiful building I had ever seen. It was this huge, long corridor building, and it was made of white marble, like polished white marble. And something I always like to tell people is, when you hear about a traditional near death experience, normally what happens is the person has some kind of an accident, like a car accident, or they're in the hospital having surgery and they die. And then all of a sudden, they find themselves floating above their body. They can look down and they can see different rescue crews, or they can see doctors and nurses working on them. And then they become aware of a tunnel and they start moving down this tunnel. And they see at the end of the tunnel is a white light. And as they're moving down the tunnel, they're met by someone, usually somebody who they knew in their lifetime who passed. Maybe it was a parent, a grandparent, a good friend, and that person tells them, it's not your time to go. You have to go back. So we never knew what happened when someone goes into the light. With my experience, I think one of the reasons that they gave me what they gave me was that I could tell people now what happens when you go into the light. What happens when a person dies and it's their time to go, that they when they go through the tunnel and they go into the light, they end up where I was, where my experience started. And I don't, even to this day, I don't know how they did that. I don't know how they bypassed the tunnel, how they bypassed all of it. They somehow did, and they transported me on the other side of the light. And what's there is called the Orientation Center. It's the very first place we end up when we cross over. And I want to tell your audience this too, because it'll kind of set the stage. All of us have a spirit guide, and I had never heard that term before when I was 21. I didn't know anything about that. And when I was in that orientation center, I heard in my left ear, "My name is Alan. I'm your spirit guide." And what happened is my spirit guide Ellen took me to all these different places on the other side. And he took me to the outside of these buildings first and told me what they were. And then he took me to the inside and told me what these buildings are about, what people do there. So that's kind of how I was able to relate this story to people, because as I'm experiencing all of this, he's telling me in my left ear what I'm seeing. So that kind of sets the stage. So going back to this building that I was in, it was so long, I could not see the end of it. It had to be miles and miles long. It was absolutely beautiful, breathtakingly beautiful white marble. And to the right of me were these beautiful 20, 30 feet high marble columns. And they were about 6 feet apart. And they went down as far as you could see. These columns 6 feet apart, super tall. In the middle of this corridor were these tables, square tables, again made of marble, and they had four benches on each side of the table, again all the way down as far as you could see. At each one of these tables were two people, and my guide told me that what these people do on the other side is they're orientation counselors. And I'll explain that a little bit more when I get to that part of my story. And so I was standing there, and on the left hand side, well, on the right were the columns, the middle were these tables. And on the left hand side, the only way that I can describe what I saw were tunnels. And they looked like they had been cut out of solid marble, absolutely perfect 90-degree angles, just like a doorway. And it was like looking in to solid blackness, but it was alive somehow. Somehow, this blackness, it wasn't just nothing, there was something there. And they're the tunnels that we all go through when we leave this life, when we die. We pass through the tunnels and we end up in the orientation center. Well, my guide told me to look at the next tunnel. And as I looked up to the next tunnel, a man came through, and he was an elderly gentleman. He was probably in his 80s or his 90s, and he had his right hand holding his chest, his left side, like he was in pain. And my guide said he died from a heart attack. Well, the very moment that he stepped through the tunnel, one of the counselors stood up, and it was a woman. She walked up to him. She took his hands in hers, and she walked him back to the table and sat him down across from her. And she held his hands the entire time. Well, she started talking to him, but I was too far away to hear what she was saying. But what she was telling him was what orientation counselors do on the other side. And the reason that they exist is that when we come into a lifetime, and I don't understand how this works, I just know that it does somehow happen. But when we come into a lifetime, we lose our memory of where we're from, of where we came from. And I think the reason is it would be too hard to stay in a lifetime when you realized how beautiful the other side really was. And the other side is, it's like a paradise. It's what the Bible calls heaven. Some people call it the afterlife, but people on the other side say it's the other side. That's what they call it. Well, my guy, as this woman was talking to this man, he told me to watch him. So I started watching him. And all of a sudden, as she was talking to him, telling him about, you were just in a lifetime, you finished your life, now you're back on the other side. As she was telling him all this, he began to change. And he changed from an elderly man into a man in his late 20s or early 30s. And my guide said, everybody on the other side is in their 30s. He didn't tell me why that is. I don't know if it has anything to do with Jesus when he was killed in this life. I don't know why we're all young like that. but everybody appears that way. Here's one of my most favorite parts about this part of my story. As soon as she was done talking to him and he got his memory back, because when you're on the other side, all of your memories come flowing back as to where you're from, all of your different experiences. You realize that, okay, I just finished a lifetime on Earth. Now I'm back home again. Well, he stood up and he walked off to the right and he walked down between these pillars or between the columns, about 3 steps down into what I call the gardens. I don't know if that's what they're called, but that's what they looked like. Just absolutely the most beautiful, picturesque gardens you could ever imagine, like a perfectly manicured English garden. And there were all these people there, hundreds of people. And why this is a big deal is when a person has an earth life, it's a really big deal to finish that life because being here on earth, it's really hard. There are many, many souls who don't want to come here because life on this planet is so hard. And when a person finishes and they go back to the other side, it's a really big deal to go back and to say that you finished your lifetime. So, what this gentleman was seeing, all these people were people that he knew in his lifetime, his parents, siblings, grandparents, friends, and everybody who knew on the other side. Everybody is there to greet you. And everybody was applauding. They were hugging him, laughter. It was like, it's like a big reunion when you get back to the other side. And that was one of my favorite parts because there are so many people that I can't wait to see. And that's all of us. All of us are going to get to see our parents again, our loved ones, our friends, our family. Everyone will be there. And that's one of the most hopeful experiences that I took away from my experience was that everyone is there. And it's a really big deal when you finish your lifetime. So that was the orientation center. Yeah.
So two questions. One is when the counselor was sitting down and talking with him, do you feel like that's what some people have started to coin the term as the life review?
Not exactly. The life review is what happened to me next.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
it's
then I was gonna say, and then my next question was, you said they completed their life. What if someone cut their life short? Would it still be treated the same as saying you completed your life, or
yeah, and from my experience, yes. And this is the weird thing that I wish I could have asked somebody, but I didn't know that I had died in my experience until the end. I didn't know that I had died. But from my experience, nobody dies by accident. There seems to be a reason why all of us go the way that we do. And it's not an accident. It's not just, oh my gosh, he's going to pass. Everybody knew in this reunion, in those gardens, everybody knew when this gentleman was going to finish his lifetime and when he was going to come back. And I don't know how they know that. I tell people when I looked at those tables that these counselors sat at, there were no computers there. There was no paperwork. There were no computers. I don't understand how they know someone is coming through the tunnel, how they know someone just finished their life, but they do. And even,
connection?
yeah, even people that have had accidents that you think are just random, horrible accidents, there really aren't any because all of us have to leave this lifetime at some point. Some of us go by longevity, just old age. Some go by having cancer or a disease, and others go by accidents. So, from my experience, I didn't get the feeling that it really is an accident how we cross, that everything has a reason, that there's a purpose for everything about our lifetimes. And I'll explain that a little bit more detail when I get to talking about the scrolls. But your question about the life review, that comes next. And I want to tell your audience, the building that I was in, called the Orientation Center, if you go to Google and you do a Google search for the Temple of Artemis, 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 that's a temple that is built in Turkey. And it looks exactly like the temple that I saw on the other side. It looks just like the Orientation Center, just much, much longer. But I found that building by accident. I was Googling one day, looking at different Greek pyramids, Greek architecture. And this showed up on Google in the country of Turkey. So it's called the Temple of Artemis. Well, the next building my guide took me to, it was a huge rectangular building. Again, it looked like it was made of marble. Absolutely gorgeous. And then he took me to the inside, and he took me to one of the many rooms that was inside this building. And the one that I was in, it was a round room, really big, but it was round. It was kind of like a movie theater, but instead of having one screen up front, it had movie screens that went all around in a circle on top. So everywhere I looked, I could see a different movie screen. There must have been 15 or 20 of them. And all of a sudden, they clicked on. And what I was watching was my life. And every screen had a different age of my lifetime that I had lived. One screen showed me as a little baby jumping in my crib. Another screen showed me as a toddler. Another screen showed me as my first day in kindergarten, all the way up to age 21, the age where I had my experience. And this is what my guide told me, was the life review. And you have a life review because you want to see if you accomplished everything you set out to accomplish. Because none of us come here by accident. We all come here for a very specific reason. And part of the life review is you get to see how you were in each age of your lifetime. And you learn from that. It was absolutely fascinating because it was like watching a movie of my lifetime at different ages. And all of us will get to have that life review because nothing is forgotten. And the strangest thing that to this day, I still don't understand is how does your life get recorded? How is it recorded that it can be played on a video screen at the ending of your lifetime? And again, all I can attribute that to is that it's God, that it had the technology, the understanding is far greater than our human minds can understand. So that was the life review. That was just the neatest, one of the neatest parts of my experience. The next place he took me to, oh, do you have a question?
I was gonna ask, when you're saying you're in the live review and all the screens are showing you different things, let's say, for example, something happened to you that was blocked from your memory. So it's like you have no idea about this. Would that show up on that screen at that time?
I
Or
think so. I think so. Your guide is with you when you do your life review, so you're not there by yourself. I think they can show anything that's pivotal in your lifetime, even the things that you think are so trivial. And um, there was a point in one of the films when I was a little kid, and I had helped this little kid. His name was Troy, and he had some kind of a physical disability, and he had to use crutches. Well, one time in the playground, he fell, and I ran over to him and I helped him stand up. Well, that was on my life review, and it was something I absolutely, totally forgot about. And it was a big deal for them. To me, it was like anybody would have done that for this kid to help him stand up. But when you have your life review, that's kind of like a big deal for them that you actually did something without thinking that helped somebody else. Something that I thought that just it's absolutely meaningless. But on the other side, it's a big deal. So you can see a lot of things that you think don't mean anything. But what they show you on these different screens are things that teach you. Because the whole purpose of the life review is to learn from it, to learn from your lifetime. Because there's one of the main reasons that we choose to come into a life is to learn and to experience. And that's why we have the life review. And you can see every single episode of your life. And in terms of things that you forgot, absolutely. They'll show you things that they're not going to show you anything embarrassing, anything private, but they'll show you that the episodes of your life that meant something, that help you grow and help you learn.
I wonder too, though, if there were moments like you're saying that were pivotal, but they were really hard and like almost traumatizing to you at the time. Would they show those as well, or would if you say, "Hey, I don't want to look at that," do they say, "Okay, we're not going to look at that"?
Yeah, they don't force you to watch anything. It's almost the same thing as like when you review your life, nobody judges you. There's no judge, there's no God doesn't judge you. Nobody actually judges your behavior. You judge yourself, how you did in that lifetime. But if there's something you don't want to see, you don't have to see it. You can just see the things that you want to see that help you. Probably at some point you want to go back and see the thing that was traumatizing just to desensitize yourself from it so you can move forward. But when you do your life review for the first time, because you can go back and you can see your life as many times as you want. The thing that's interesting about the life review is everybody has to have one. Everybody has a life review. Somebody like Hitler, for example, they don't escape the life review. Everybody has to have one. And if you treated people badly, if you were a horrible person, you actually feel what people feel, that you contributed to something that caused them pain or caused them hurt. You can actually feel what they felt. And I think that was the hardest part about having the life review. But that's one of the main it's one of the main things that helps us learn is wow, I didn't realize that I hurt somebody when I said that. And all those things come into it. All those things are part of your life review. They show you the good things, and they also show you the things that you can do better next time. Does that kind of make sense?
It does, and you actually answered my next question. I was going to say about the feeling, and you brought that up, and so that was perfect.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Well, the next place my guide took me to, I thought was one of the most interesting because I was raised Catholic. My dad was very Catholic, and we used to go to church 3 times a week and then on Sundays. So I was raised Catholic, and I never had any exposure really to anything else that wasn't Catholic. Well, my guide took me to another beautiful building. It was a beautiful rectangle building, and it had marble columns all around the perimeter. He took me in on the inside, and this was kind of similar to the building where you do your life review. But this one, he took me to a room that looked just like what we would call a modern day movie theater. It had one screen up front. And my guide said, I'm going to show you past lifetimes. Well, this was something that I had never considered before because that's not part of the Bible. That's not part of religion. It's not part of Catholicism. So I had a really hard time trying to comprehend this. So all of a sudden, the screen came on, and he was showing me a lifetime that I had lived as a monk. And I had a shaved head. I was wearing a red gown, and I was in a monastery. And my job in that lifetime was to teach the young kids about life in a monastery and how to become a monk. Well, he showed me another life. And this second life was of a shoe peddler. And I had a little rickety old wheelbarrow made of wood, and I had a bunch of shoes in it. And my job in that lifetime was to fix people's shoes in that village. And an interesting part about this past life experience was that I knew what part of the world these lifetimes took place in. The lifetime with the monastery was somewhere in Asia, Southeast Asia. The lifetime where I was a shoe peddler took place in Eastern Europe. And the third lifetime he showed me was of a fisherman. And I was on a lake in just a raggedy old wooden boat. And I had some nets. And I was casting them out to catch fish. And my job in that lifetime was to help feed the village. And it was so amazing. You don't look anything like you look in your current life, but you know when you're looking at the screen that that's you. And all of us have had multiple lifetimes. I don't think there is anybody that's only ever had one life. We have many lifetimes if we want to, because we are eternal. We never die. That's how God created us. And He's given us the ability to always learn. It's something I like to tell people, because people ask me, do we always? I think God hardwired all of us with the passion to want to learn new things. Because I have never met anybody, any time in my life, who didn't like learning new things. And so God created us with this unending curiosity to want to learn. And He created the ability for us to come into lifetimes on different planets to experience. And I'll tell you about that in just a second, too. So I had these 3 different lifetimes, and He just wanted me to be able to tell people that past lifetimes are real, and that you can have as many lifetimes as you want. It's totally up to you. So that was a really favorite part about my near-death experience, was learning about past lifetimes, because you wonder, if you live for eternity, there's got to be something else that you can do while you're on the other side. And there are. The other side is all about learning and growing also, but you also spend time just visiting with friends and loved ones. And what's so amazing about the other side, they told me, is that anything you like to do here on earth, you can do on the other side. If you like hiking, if you like going to music festivals, if you enjoy cooking, if you like to paint, everything you do here, you can do on the other side. It's an absolute incredible paradise. Well, I want to get to the next place he took me to. And
Before you
this one,
get there, though,
oh,
I
go
have a
ahead.
question for you.
Yeah.
When you're talking about past lives, and I'm wondering if, because of the way your mind was, being so new to past lives, they restricted them to lifetimes on Earth. Do you think it's possible to have had past lives where you weren't on Earth?
Oh, absolutely. I know that's true. Yeah, and I'll tell you, I have a whole specific part of my NDE where they showed me that. So yeah, it's absolutely true.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Well, the next place he took me to, this building was a little bit different looking, and I cannot overemphasize how large all of these structures were that he was showing me. And he only showed me a small part of the other side. It was almost like being on a college campus. You know how colleges have you've got your science building, then you have your history building and your English building. That's kind of what it felt like where I was on the other side, where all these buildings were located generally in the same vicinity. But the other side, in its totality, is like a planet, absolutely humongous. So I only saw one part. And for whatever reason, this was the part that they wanted me to tell people. That's what they gave me the memory for. Well, this next building, it was it was round. It was a beautiful, round, enormous building. And they had, again, marble columns all around the circle, all around the circumference of this building. And it had a big, huge dome on top. And this building is where we go when we plan a lifetime. And my guide didn't tell me why we go here, but for whatever reason, that's where we go when we want to plan a lifetime. And my guide took me into the building and he took me up to a beautiful white marble table. And there was a scroll, a rolled up scroll on this table. And he told me, this is the scroll of your life. And you know what? What it looked like was old Egyptian papyrus. It looked like that. Well, I picked it up and there was a blue ribbon around this scroll. So I took the ribbon off and I unfolded the scroll on the table. And I could see immediately that it was in black lettering. It was all written out. And it looked like calligraphy, the kind of writing where you have the ink pen, you dip it into ink and you write it out. It looked like that. Well, he told me that everybody who comes into a lifetime has a scroll. And the reason for the scroll is that you plan out your lifetime and you actually write out everything you want to accomplish. Things like, what country are you going to be born into? What language are you going to learn? Who your parents are going to be? Are you going to have siblings? Are you going to go to college? What kind of a career are you going to have? Are you going to have kids? All of these things go into your life scroll. And on the other side of me, on the right hand side, was this unbelievably large wall. It had to have been miles long. And it was full of scrolls. Every single person who comes into a lifetime writes out these scrolls. And I could see everybody's scrolls to the right of me. And when I went to try to look at mine, to try to read it, it folded up again. And I wasn't able to read it. And I think the reason for that was it might invalidate what I came here to learn. If I knew what I was going to experience ahead of time, I might not do what I planned to do. So they just wanted me to tell people that your lifetime isn't random. It's not an accident, that there's an actual purpose and there's a plan for it, to help you learn whatever it is you want to learn. And all of us have different reasons, different goals for coming into a lifetime. And I like to tell people it's kind of like what we do at the beginning of every new year. A lot of people will write down New Year's resolutions. That's kind of what you do when you plan a lifetime, that everything has a reason and everything you experience has a purpose for it. And it's all to help us grow and to help us learn. Because the one thing that we take with us when we finish a lifetime is our character and what we learn from that life. And it makes us more than when we were when we left to come into a lifetime. And that's the whole reason that we learn, is to take that knowledge with us. Here's something else that I thought was so extraordinary. He took me to another area of this building, and it was a huge library. And have you ever seen what Encyclopedia Britannicas look like? They're kind of thick books, and they were all purple. All of these books looked the same. They were in this room, and they all had gold lettering on them. Well, the lettering, it was so unique that the lettering didn't go horizontal over the book. It went vertical. And there's a name on every single one of these books. And what the books are, they're your soulmate. Everybody was created with a perfect mate. And that's where I learned about the term soulmate. I had never heard that term before, but every one of us was created with a perfect mate. Well, my book had the name Nina, and it was Nina in gold lettering. And he was showing me that my soulmate's name is Nina. And the whole reason he showed this to me was to let people know that every single person has a soulmate. And I think the reason he wanted me to know that was that there are so many people here on earth who never find what they would call a perfect mate for them. And will they always be alone? And the answer is no. You'll never be alone, because on the other side, you have your perfect mate. What I don't know, though, is, does the soulmate come into a lifetime with you? That's something I don't know. My first inkling about that is that the soulmate doesn't come into every lifetime with you. And I think the reason for that is we all learn so much by coming and having relationships here. And I think if your soulmate was with you, you wouldn't learn that much because you have the perfect person with you. So that's something I don't know. I don't know if they come into a lifetime with us. I do know that it's not impossible. They can. I just don't know if they do very often.
Think about it. If we did come in with the same person every time, not only would we maybe not learn what we really needed to learn, but it would feel like, when you go and meet back up on the other side, it would be no different. It would be like, yeah, we were just together.
Yeah,
Now we're
exactly.
together here. So,
Yeah,
where's the magic of it?
yeah,
It
exactly.
make it, I hate to say it, but it make it boring after a few millennia. Going,
Yeah, yeah,
oh, we're going at it again. All
yeah,
right.
exactly. That's how I see it. I think that's what happens. And I'm sure there are times when people have come in together for a lifetime. I just don't think it happens very often. Here's something else I wanted to tell you. When I was in the room where he showed me the scroll, this is the first time that I really saw a bunch of people. Because up to this point, I was kind of just with my guide by myself. Well, I looked over on the left hand side, and there was this window, this huge, gigantic window. And as I looked out of it, there was a walkway in front, and there were all kinds of people walking back and forth. It was kind of like going to a big city at lunchtime and seeing all these different people. And that's when I realized that people have bodies just like we do. I've heard so many people say, or they ask me, what do we look like on the other side? And I tell them our bodies look just like they do here. But what's interesting is that our bodies on the other side are perfect. They don't get sick, they don't age, they don't die, they don't have injuries. In the bodies that we have on Earth, that's almost like a poor replica of what they're really like on the other side. And everybody has their own look. Some people have dark hair, some people are blonde, some people are tall, some people are shorter, but we all have form on the other side. We all appear however we want to appear. And one of the neatest parts about this is on the other side of that walkway, there was a lake. And this is where I saw that, oh my gosh, there's absolutely beauty on the other side also. And there was this huge lake, and all around the outside of the lake were these weeping willow trees. And you ever seen weeping willow trees? All their leaves come down to the ground.
Right.
All these leaves were floating in this lake. It was absolutely gorgeous. And the water was so clear that I could see the bottom of the lake. It was absolutely breathtaking. So that was the building where we go to plan a lifetime. And this next part is
I, I
something.
have something for you.
Oh yeah, yeah,
When you said the scroll closed up so you couldn't see the future and you weren't sure why,
yeah,
I got the feeling it's, when we're here now going, okay, I have experienced so much trauma. I have experienced so much of this. I don't want any more. And if you were to look at your life on the scroll and go, oh my God, I got another one coming,
yeah,
you would alter it maybe or cross it off and you would lose the opportunity of it.
exactly,
That may be why they don't allow you to see, is because being here for 1 year to say 21 years, 30 years, you're like, I changed my mind on this one.
exactly.
Changed my mind on this one.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's true for all of us. If you look at your life where you are now, to think what you went through to get you to the person that you are today, you would think to yourself, I am never going to experience that. I don't want to experience that. When my mom and dad died, I'd always known that they were going to be okay. That I knew where they went, and that I was going to be with them again at some point. I just didn't want to go through the actual experience of that. And I there's so many things that I look back at my life and I think what I went through, that horrible tough time, made me the person that I am today. So there's a reason that all of us go through tough times, because it's the tough times that seem to teach us the most. You don't learn much when everything goes perfectly. It's only when you have to really dig deep that you learn and become more and become better than you were before. So that's a great question. Yeah.
I'm also noticing time wise, we're like 6 minutes from the hour.
I
Are you
can.
okay to go longer?
Yeah, yeah. Yep,
Okay.
I'm only halfway done. I still have more, which is crazy, huh? Do you
Well,
do you have time?
I have time.
Okay, great, great. Well, here is the next part of this is probably my most favorite part of my near death experience. And it answers one of the questions you mentioned earlier in the show. He took me to after he showed me the building where we do our lifetimes, he took me to what I can only describe is it looked like a sports stadium. Absolutely gigantic, huge stadium. It looked like it could fit tens of thousands of people, but it wasn't an outside stadium. All the seats were on the inside. So he showed me the stadium and then he took me inside. And I remember this so vividly. There were thousands of chairs and all the lights were on. And the ceiling was this huge, big dome. And what my guide told me, he said, this is the planetarium. When you were a kid, did you ever go to a planetarium?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people can understand what this was like. You go to a planetarium to see and they show stars and different planets and things like that on the ceiling. Well, that's where I was. I was in a planetarium. And on the other side, everybody seems to have some kind of a job, but it's not like a job that we have here where you have to go to a job, you've got to go to your work because you need money to pay your bills and pay your mortgage or your car insurance or utilities. Everyone on the other side has jobs, but they do them because they love to do them. It's what they love. The people in the orientation center, they're called orientation counselors, and that's what they love to do, help people transition back to the other side. Well, there was a gentleman who was behind me in this planetarium. And I don't know why, but I never turned around to look at him. I never thought of it. I just was listening to him. And he said, "Let's begin." And all of a sudden, all the lights went off and it was pitch black. And his job on the other side was he loved stars, he loved galaxies, he loved astronomy, and his job was to run the planetarium. So I sat down and I looked up and he said, "Let's begin." And he said, "When you look at the stars," meaning not just me, but he was referring to humanity, people on Earth at their level of development at that time period. He said, "When you look at the stars, this is what you see." And he started showing pictures of our planets in our solar system: Earth, then Uranus, then Neptune, and Venus, and Saturn, and Jupiter, and then our sun, all of our planets. And then it disappeared. It went blank. And then he said, "When we look at the stars," meaning all the people on the other side with their level of development and awareness, he said, "When we look at the stars, this is what we see." And all of a sudden, he started showing me planet after planet after planet. First, there were dozens, then hundreds, then thousands, and then multiple millions of planets. And he said to me, "There is far more life in the universe than you can possibly know." And not only were there other planets, but believe it or not, we can have lifetimes on virtually any of them. Earth is not the only planet that has civilized life forms. There are multiple billions of other planets. And here's something I want to share with your audience. This is something that I think will put this part of my experience into a little bit more perspective. I was reading an article from this woman who was an astronomer, and she was trying to explain to people, a layperson, how large the universe truly is. And she was given the example of our galaxy, the Milky Way. And she said, if we had a spaceship that could travel at the speed of light, which we know is 186,000 miles per second, that's the fastest speed that we know. If you took that ship and started at one end of our galaxy and flew to the other end of our galaxy, just the Milky Way, it would take 99,000 years just to get to one end of our galaxy. And she was trying to explain to people that modern astronomy has found 286,000 separate galaxies. And she went on to say that just in the Milky Way, they estimate that there are over 100 billion planets just in our galaxy. And so on the other side, when I was having my experience, he was showing me that there are so many planets in the universe that it is so exciting to think that Earth is not the only place we can go. There are multitudes, unending other places we can go. And I think because I've always loved science and always loved astronomy, and I grew up watching Star Trek, the original Captain Kirk Star Trek. And I'd always loved space, and just so absolutely fascinated to learn that there are so many planets we can have lifetimes on. I thought that was just absolutely extraordinary.
I actually have a comment I want to share with you that I think you will enjoy seeing as well. And And Barbara Woodbury Spur says, "This is an extremely interesting show. So much validation for me as to how my life is unfolding, the experiences I have had, and my personal growth from my past experiences. I feel my guides with me. I have visits from family that I have lost, and I have great peace in my life."
That's fantastic. That's wonderful. That's why I share my story for people just like Barbara to share my story so it validates for them what they've known and experienced their whole lives.
Right. And I have to admit, going from memory of, hearing your story on Paranormal Verse, I like when you said we're only halfway there, I was like, wait a minute. Does that mean we're getting more on this episode? Because I don't remember it only being half of a story.
It's crazy. I know my experience is just absolutely crazy. But I'm getting close to being done.
Oh, I'm not worried about that. It's just I'm just enjoying hearing it again and like new questions coming to mind and going and then thinking, did I ask this before? I don't think so.
It's funny because I think of questions all the time that I wish I could have asked. I always think of questions I wish that I could have asked because I get so many questions from people and I don't have all the answers. I wish I did. My experience is kind of like a piece of the jigsaw puzzle. Everybody who has an NDE has another piece of the jigsaw puzzle, and we're all trying to figure out what this big puzzle is like. And my story is just one of those jigsaw pieces, but it's very detailed. So
What's interesting, I was going to share real quick when disclosure is John and I were talking before the show started about Stargate and how we loved the Stargate series and the movies. And as you were saying, all these worlds with civilizations on it, you mentioned Star Trek. In my mind, went to Stargate, going, "Huh? Are we going to start traveling to all of these worlds?"
I wish I could have. And I wish that I had more time to to explore more of what they were showing me because it's so weird that I was only officially dead for 7 minutes, but I felt like I was on the other side for an hour or two because they don't have time like we do. It doesn't exist like our linear time does.
Right.
Well, I'll keep going. The next place he took me to was also just fascinating to me because I love history. I'm a big history buff, and this next part was just fantastic. He took me to a building, and this one was the largest so far of any he had showed me. It was a huge rectangular building, but it didn't have columns on the side. It only had the marble columns in the front. And have you ever seen the face of our Supreme Court building?
Yes.
That's what it looked like. It had the triangle ceiling and had the columns in front. And it had like 50 or 60 steps to get up to the doorway to walk in. So he showed me the outside. And then when we went inside, I knew that it was a library, the biggest library you could possibly imagine. I mean, it had to have been miles long. And anything that you ever wanted to learn, you could go to this library. And people have asked me if my guide told me what it was called, and he didn't. But people have asked me, or they said to me, it sounds like this was what they call the Akashic records. And I have since heard that term before, but my guide didn't tell me the name of this building. He just showed me that it was this huge library, and anything you wanted to learn about was there, whether it was history or art or music or philosophy, everything was in this building. Well, he wanted to show me something else, and this was my favorite part about this part of the building. On the left hand side there were these rooms, and they looked like our modern library rooms you can go in and have a study session in. And they looked about the size of someone's average living room. Well, they took me to one of the rooms, and there was a woman who was sitting there. She was sitting on a couch, and her back was towards me. And all I could see of her was her back and her hair. And she had jet black hair, straight, that went all the way down her waist. And she was wearing some kind of a purplish, um, purplish gown. And she was watching what looked like, or what we would say today was a flat screen TV mounted on the wall. And it was a big screen. And when my experience happened, it was 1987. And we didn't have flat screen TVs yet. We had these big, bulky television sets. So it was extraordinary to see this TV mounted on the wall. And she was watching something. And my guide said she was watching a battle that took place on Earth 200 years ago. And I looked at the screen, and what she was watching was a battle that took place between the Native American Indian tribes, the Plains tribes, versus the United States cavalry. And it was a battle. And he told me that she wanted to learn about that particular era of Earth's history. And you could watch it as it really happened. And it wasn't like a movie where there were actors' portrayals and directors. It wasn't like that. She was actually watching the real battle that took place. And I was so fascinated by that, because that means on the other side, when you're back, you can go and watch any particular era of Earth's history that you're interested in. And something I want to see when I get back is I want to go back and watch World War II on D-Day, when the Allies invaded France. That's something I've always wanted to see. And I am so encouraged and so excited about leaving when we're all done. And if we finish our lifetimes here, we can go to the other side, and you can look at all the things that you've been interested in during your lifetime. What anything you want to watch about history, you can go and watch. Isn't that just absolutely fascinating?
And it kind of, in a way, I was just sitting here in my mind laughing, going, you could go back and watch Christ, you could watch the pyramids being built, you could watch the
Everything.
ziggurats, and your reaction is, I want to go to D-Day. And it's like, wait, why are you going so local?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it is amazing that, yeah, it made me wonder too, going, if I was to walk in that room going, like you're saying, being fascinated by history, going, where would I go?
yeah,
What would I want to watch?
exactly. Yeah. It's unlimited. And I just love that part, because I've always been a history buff, because history teaches you so much. Oh, here's something else that I think you'll like. The next place he took me to was a castle, a castle that looked just like the castles that are built in England, made of stone. And this castle was absolutely pristine and perfect, just like it was first built on Earth. And he told me that any period of Earth's history that you want to learn about, you can go on the other side to kind of like museums in a way, museums built of what a particular time period looked like. So he wanted me to be able to tell people that on the other side, you can still learn and you can still grow even when you aren't in a lifetime. Because there are so many periods that a person might want to learn about that they didn't have a lifetime in. And one example, whoops, sorry. And one example would be going to the castles and seeing that particular period of Earth's history. Well, what this was, and the reason that this existed, was you can go into this castle, and the most beautiful part about this was the red carpet. There was red carpet all throughout the floor of this castle. It was huge. And on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side of this castle were these walls. And on the walls were life-size paintings of people that had lived during that time period in that castle. So, for example, King George or Queen Elizabeth, all of these people, you could walk in there, you could look at their picture, see what they dressed like. And here was the most interesting part about this. There was a podium in front of every single painting. And on the podium, there was a book. And it looked like a Bible that was folded open. And every single painting had one of these books. And what it was you could go to this castle, you could learn about this person by seeing what they looked like, then you could actually take the book and you could read every single thing about that person's lifetime as that royal, whether they were a king or a queen or a prince. You could read about their lifetime and you could learn about that time of Earth's history. Well, here's the next thing that happened is something that I still kick myself even to this day. When I looked over to my right, you know how castles had those circular stairwells that led up to the next level? I looked off to my right and there was a woman who started walking down this stairwell. And she was strawberry blonde, her hair down to about her shoulders, and she was wearing kind of a peach colored gown or robe. And she walked up to me. She could see me. She walked up to me and she said, "Is there anything I can help you find?" You know what I said to her? To this very day, I still can't believe I said this. I said, "No thanks, I'm just looking." So why would I say that? I could have asked her anything. I could have said, "What's going on? I thought I was supposed to be having surgery. Where am I? Who are you? What are all these different things I'm seeing?" But I didn't know that I had died. So I didn't know what to ask her. And my guide told me that what she loved to do on the other side was be a historian of that particular era of Earth's history. So you could go to the other side when your time is finished, when you finish your lifetime, and anything you want to learn about, you can go watch videos, you can go look at the buildings that were back then, and you can also go talk to someone like this girl who's an expert in that particular time of Earth's history. So talk about fascinating. Isn't that just so interesting?
So I'm sitting here going, when you said, like, I was laughing because I remember you were just gonna say, no thanks, I'm just looking.
Yeah.
I was like, in my head going, yes, I would be saying, so where is Arthur and why was he erased from history?
Yes. Yep. I could have asked any number of things. I felt like that's what people say when they walk into a store and you're looking to buy clothes. You just say, "Oh no, thanks, I'm just looking." I I I had no idea what to ask her. I had no idea.
See, and in all fairness, though, I feel like that was the most honest human thing you could do in that moment because I think our mind would be so overwhelmed. We would be like you're saying, you have no idea what to ask because it's like you're in such awe of where you are. It's like, I don't want to sound stupid, so I'm just going to say, no, thank you.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yep. That's exactly. So that was a really fun part of my experience too that I just loved. Another reason why I think I cannot wait to get back because there are so many things we get to do, and it's such a hopeful message. My story, and well, here's the last part. This is the part that has given me kind of the impetus to share my story so much. The next thing that happened is my guide took me to a field, and it was the most beautiful wildflower field I had ever seen. There were beautiful rolling hills in the back and flowers in this field. And up to this very point, my guide, Alan, was with me the whole time until this point, and then he disappeared. The next thing that happened is a man showed up in front of me, and it was Jesus. He didn't say what his name was. I just knew that this was Jesus. And I could see his hands, I could see his feet. He was wearing gold sandals that laced up his calves, and he was wearing a white robe with a golden sash or kind of a golden belt around his waist. And he was different. He was different than everybody else I saw because I couldn't see his face. He was so bright that it looked like lightning was coming out of his face. I couldn't make out any of his features. But he spoke to me and he said, "You must tell them there is no death." In the very second he said that, boom, I woke up back in the hospital room. And I was absolutely in awe because I asked the doctor, I said, "What just happened?" Thinking he could tell me what did I just see? What was all of that? And instead he said, "We lost you." I said, "You lost me? How long?" And he said, 7 minutes. I couldn't believe it because it felt like I was gone for at least an hour. And that's how my story ended. And I have I have thought about those words every single day, that you must tell them there is no death. And that's one of the reasons why I have tried to share my story with anybody who will listen, because there is no death. Or when we pass from this life, we just go back home again. Life is eternity. And being here on this planet is just a very, very short time in that eternity.
Right, and I agree, and I would be like you in that moment saying, "Wait, what just happened?" And what's interesting is we had a comment that I had mentioned at the beginning of the show that I was going to wait till the end to make sure your story, was shared. And I feel like we've answered the question, but they put it back up again. So they asked me to please. Oh, here, let me put it up on screen. It says, "Michael, please ask John to verify if it's really true that each of us incarnates to Earth in order to test ourselves under challenging conditions. What about the so-called elite? Life is easy for them." I feel like we've answered about being, you know, like, the scrolls where we write out what challenges we're supposed to do and everything. But I feel like my personal take on that is the elite is learning their own thing. And life may appear easy for them, but we don't know what they're really learning.
That's true. We don't know what they come in for. And one thing I want to clarify is the reason that we decide to come into lifetimes at all is because life on these different planets is not perfect. The other side is perfect. The other side doesn't have war. There's no hunger. There's no homelessness. There's no disease. There's nothing of a negative nature there. There's nothing to really test yourself over. And we learn, and I think God set this whole thing up for us to have the experiences of coming in to go through hard times, because you really learn. Nobody on the other side is forced to come into a lifetime. It's totally up to them. There are some people that have had only a few lifetimes, and there are others that have had thousands. It's totally up to the individual soul. But nobody gets into a lifetime on this planet and gets out without scars. just living here produces scars. And some people have more than others. Some people choose to have harder lifetimes than other people do. And again, it's all for the purpose of learning and experiencing. And when we're here, we don't always remember. I think very, very few of us ever really remember where we're from and why we chose the certain things that we chose. And there are so many different scenarios and so many different vignettes about why we're here and how our lifetime affects other people. There's so much, it's like this big, huge tapestry that goes into a lifetime, and every lifetime seems to affect another. And that affects another, and that affects somebody else. And this person learned from you, this person experienced from you, this person became better from having known you. I mean, we don't remember all the different lessons we come in for.
Right. And one of the things that I feel was really beautiful about your experience that I want to hope that people hear, but at the same time, also it's like a double edged sword kind of feeling, is everybody goes to the same place. So no matter how you died, you go through the orientation, you go through the life review. Like you were saying, there was no mistake in how you died. So I think that's a beautiful thing that I hope people hear and brings them comfort with, dealing with people who have died in various circumstances. So hopefully that brings them peace. But at the same time, I know some people might be angry about hearing, well, this guy who killed my parent or my loved one or friend, how dare they get to this beautiful place?
I know. I have thought about that before too, and many people have asked me that. And it's true. You do think that. You think, how is that possible? But we just don't remember the things that we charted for ourselves. We don't remember what we put down scrolls and why. Our lifetime, what we chose to learn can be so varied. We don't remember how much our lives affect others. And we don't remember what we came to learn. And not just learn, but our experience also teaches other people. So we don't remember people we might come in to have something very horrific happen, but we do it to test ourselves. And we also do it to help others who want to learn something from that lifetime as well. So there are all kinds of reasons that we come into a lifetime and experience the things that we do. And we can't always know why we're here, why we would have chosen that. And there are things I think all of us would say there was no way in the world that I would have chosen to go through what I went through, but we actually do. And I think the reason is, remember we talked about earlier that the other side doesn't have time like we do?
Right.
When somebody dies and they go back to the other side and they leave their families here on earth, the person who passed over doesn't grieve like we do. And the reason for that is because they're going to see their family members in a matter of months or a couple of weeks, because for them, that's what it feels like. Whereas for us, we might be here another 40, 50, 60 years without that person. And to us, it seems like a long time and we grieve. But on the other side, when you plan a lifetime, you think to yourself, okay, I'm not going to be gone very long. I want to see what I can do. I want to see what I can learn and see how well I do. And sometimes I think we choose things that might be a little bit too hard. And I think that's what causes a lot of people to struggle is they just did choose too much. But we just don't always remember why we're here and how our lifetimes affect others.
One that I want to point out, talking about how we were saying like Barbara got validation is I grew up in the metaphysics. I didn't grow up in mainstream dogma. And so one of the things I was always taught growing up was Earth was a proving ground. It's where people would come to learn lessons. It was like the school planet. And so hearing how you were describing everything, it was like, yes, you literally just reiterated, yes, Earth is a school planet. It's a
Yeah. Yep.
proving ground.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And we come in there. I think there's really two reasons why we come here. The first one is to learn and to experience, and the second one is to help others. There's a a quote that I love from the Dalai Lama, and I read it years ago, and it's always been with me. And he said, "Our prime purpose in this life is to help others, and if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them." And that is something that I have tried to live my life that way because it makes so much sense from my experience, what I learned when I had my near death experience.
So I feel like this is a good spot to end the show. And we got all the questions asked. And one of the things that I would like to ask before we go and I close out is coming from the space after this experience and everything, what is one like golden nugget of information that you have found in your growth that you want to share with everyone and hope they leave with?
I think the thing I would say to people is give it everything you've got while you're here. You're here anyway. You're going to go through everything anyway. So give everything your best shot and experience everything you can and take it all in. And even though you go through hard times, times of struggle, it's not going to last forever. It's only temporary. So give it everything you've got, do your best, and learn as much as you can, because that's what we take with us. And that's what becomes part of our legacy for eternity.
I agree. That's a beautiful way to put it. And so I'm going to take this opportunity to say thank you to everyone in the chat room and thank you to everyone who's watching. And thank you everyone for coming back to watch this episode and forgiving us for the glitch, as I like to call it.
Yeah.
You know, life happens. So thank you for embracing tonight's episode and hearing this. And for those of you who are going to watch it on the replay, thank you for watching. And I hope you do get something out of it. And thank you to John for coming back and sharing his experience with me.
Oh, Michael, thank you so much. I enjoy sharing it. So thank you for the invitation.
Yes, and if ever in the future, you know, if you remember more or you want to expound on it, let me know and we'll be happy to bring you back on.
Absolutely. I would enjoy it.
So, with that, we are going to say good night to everyone, no matter where you are in the world. Make it a blessed day filled with love and joy. Like John said, make every day count. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.